If everyone in the world suddenly knew one fact was true, what would you choose? Story 1. Does it have to be a fact that is currently known? Because if not, I'd go with something like the design for an FTL drive. Sure, basically, everyone won't actually know enough to do anything with it, but some people are going to be quick on the draw to write pieces down, and I'd really like to visit another star someday. Story 2. I'm torn between having everyone accept that climate change is human-caused and needs to be adapted to and mitigated by reducing carbon pollution versus everyone realizing that political corruption and oligarchy are evil and need to be opposed in favor of a principled constitutional democracy that fiercely protects civil liberties, human rights, election integrity, and checks and balances. Answer. Newer research is showing that the current climate change issue is only about 40% human-caused, which is still bad. Ice core studies have shown that the Earth goes through a cycle, and this matches the last 4 cycles, although slightly sped up, about a 30% reduction in time frame, while also being about 50% later than the spacing between the other cycles. So it's a late cycle that is heavier than normal. One of the researchers, a woman, quipped, "Mother Earth and I have a lot in common in that regard." Story 3. Life is hard for most people. There will always be more questions than answers. Most things aren't as serious as you think they are, considering we're all going to die, and at some point, unless you made a big impact, we'll all be forgotten. That's more than one, but... Story 4. So many people saying there is no God. This isn't a truth you can just say. It's highly debatable, even looking at it from a purely scientific standpoint. We could be in a zoo for a more advanced species. We could be in an incredible advanced simulation. The Abrahamic God could exist, and all the BS inconsistency from the Bible could be misinterpretation, or he is simply an evil God. Atheism is as much a belief system as the rest of them and cannot be called as a universal truth because of our very basic scientific knowledge. We simply don't know what we don't know, to assume we know anything about the entirety of the universe when we cannot even reach the depths of our own ocean is incredibly bold. Unless I am misunderstanding the prompt and the thing we share tells everyone the truth. In which case, I think it would be better posed as a question. Is there a God or godlike being or more advanced civilization that can explain why humanity evolved beyond random chance? And everyone is told the answer. Answer. Saying the Abrahamic God could exist is like saying an invisible nightingale could be singing me to sleep every night. That's not logic. That's speculation with no evidence. The burden of proof is always on the one making the claim. If someone says something exists, they're the one who needs to demonstrate it, and not everyone else who refuses to believe it without evidence. Bringing in simulation theory or quantum mechanics doesn't help the argument. That just swapping one unknown for another and hoping it sticks could be is not a foundation for truth. It's just the absence of a conclusion. And honestly, atheism shouldn't even be a category. We don't have a word for people who don't believe in invisible nightingales, unicorns, or leprechauns. We shouldn't need one for people who don't believe in gods. Saying this isn't a truth makes no sense here. If there's no evidence for something and every testable claim about it fails, then the logical conclusion is that it doesn't exist. That's not just an opinion. It's the best working truth we have. Saying it's highly debatable even from a scientific standpoint is nonsense. Science doesn't keep ideas alive just because they're old or popular. If there's no evidence for something, it doesn't stay in debate forever. It gets set aside. That's how we treat everything else, be it Bigfoot, flat Earth, or ghosts. God only stays in the conversation because people are emotionally attached to the idea. What I honestly wish everyone in the world suddenly knew is what truth actually is. Not belief, not speculation, not whatever makes you feel better. Truth is what can be tested, observed, and supported by evidence. If more people understood that, maybe we wouldn't have to keep dragging conversations like this out of the mud. Education doesn't solve everything, but looking around, it's obvious we need more of it. If people want to keep hoping that something might be proven one day, fine. Get in line with the flat earthers, the Bigfoot believers, and the Loch Ness monster truthers. Anything's possible. But as of right now, nothing. No evidence. No reason to believe it unless one requires a mental teddy bear. Story 5. That you don't get to decide how anyone else lives their life or how they feel about things, and that includes gay and transgender people. It has absolutely no effect on you what someone else decides to do with their body. Story 6. That humans are not rational beings of logic. Rather, we perceive things mythologically, and our logic is simply a constructive extension of our neurological structures. We exercise logic when it's most applicable, always with a probability of failure. We don't exercise logic universally, and no one, no matter their intellectual stature, can escape this. Given this understanding, one would approach conflicting ideas with more openness. They would start to realize opposing views are two sides of the same coin. They would wield more humility, and dogma would likely be obsolete. Story 7. That other humans aren't mean to be idolized, not in any facet. Admired, sure, but interrogated as well. Humans are just humans. Idolizing anyone or anything ultimately disempowers that person and dehumanizes the idolized. No one person was meant to have power over others. Story 8. Pippi Longstocking never said I have never tried that before, so I think I should definitely be able to do that. This quote is widely available and is often assumed to be said by Pippi Longstocking, but Astrid Lindgren did not write it, and there is no known source reference to it. This one drives me absolutely nuts because it in so many lectures or classrooms. Story 9. Religion is all bullshit. Important distinction, I'm not saying faith. People individually believing in whatever they want is terrific. People following arbitrary rules set up by people to create control, gather wealth, and so on. Nah. Story 10. A factoid is not a mini-fact or small piece of true information. It is an item of unreliable information that is reported and repeated so often that some people believe it to be a fact, albeit still untrue. Story 11. The United States is smaller than China, and the only reason Wikipedia suggests otherwise is because it sources the CIA World Factbook, which inflated the figure for the USA in 1996 and 1997 for the sole purpose of making the USA seem larger than China. There are surely better causes, but this is the first one to come to mind, and this is what I'm sticking with. Story 12. Hard to choose just one. That vaccines save lives, the moon landing was real, the Earth is round. Climate change and global warming is a thing. The Orange Man is indeed a crook and should be impeached and imprisoned. Story 13. There is life after passing. There is nothing you can do to get there or get placement or any special treatment. Everyone gets treated exactly the same, but everyone there has already lived one life, so it is far more advanced. Story 14. That there is no deity. There is no supernatural aid or judgment or interference or justice. We're in it together, by ourselves. We are the kids on the Lord of the Flies Island with no external authority figure to keep control. We have to grow up and figure shoot out on our own. We have to protect our environment. We have to find lasting peace. We have to solve poverty, slavery, and grotesque income inequality. We have to eliminate corruption. And most importantly, we have to put tribalism behind us. It was important for our ancestors' survival, but it only brings harm to us now. Story 15. A teacher I know recently told me they stopped sending storybooks home in her primary school because of how many parents would burn them. Super sad to think of people actively discouraging their children from learning. Story 16. A lot of people might say something like, education is the answer. I've said that too. But the more I sit with it, the less sure I am that it's true in any universal way. How much of me thinking that was just the result of being conditioned to believe it my whole life? What kind of education? Who designs it? What values does it pass on? Most of what we call education seems more focused on preparing people to function inside systems than on helping them understand anything deeply. It's less about real insight and more about fitting in. Sometimes it isn't even about understanding at all, just memorizing, adapting, repeating. It's conditioning. And honestly, plenty of people already believe education is the answer. It's been repeated for generations. We've structured entire societies around that belief. So the idea that if everyone suddenly knew it, everything would improve, I'm not sure. A huge percentage of people already believe it. You think things would be significantly better by now, and yet here we are, still stuck, still scrambling, still asking the same questions. In some ways, things may even be getting worse. I hear young people say, now that AI is taking over, what should I go to school for? The motivation isn't truth or growth. It's survival. It's a calculation. Education becomes a way to stay economically useful, to avoid falling through the cracks. That's not learning. That's adaptation to a machine that doesn't care if you understand anything, only that you stay productive. It makes me question what we even mean when we say education. And I know space is limited. We're not penning dissertations here. There may be some viable idea attached to the sentiment. I agree that truthful knowledge can be very beneficial. Finland is often cited as one of the most educated societies in the world, with over 90% of adults completing secondary education and a high percentage attaining university degrees. But despite all that, they still face declining learning outcomes, rising mental health issues among students, a shortage of qualified teachers, and persistent social inequality, especially among migrant populations. On top of that, recent economic pressures have triggered labor strikes and public discontent. So if education alone were enough to fix a society, Finland should be a model of stability. Instead, it shows that even in the most educated countries, deep problems remain. Education helps, but it's not some magic fix. The idea that education solves everything is comforting, but reality doesn't back it up. Story 17. To be clear, are we talking educated or educated? One of the greatest black pills I've had as an adult is that people say this only to yell, no, not that kind of educated. When the so-called educated, people do something they disagree with. Humans suck. Story 18. That is so wrong it makes my head hurt. It's simplistic. 5 people can all know something to be true and still come to 10 different conclusions as to how to approach those facts. It makes my head hurt even more that you can't even form a proper sentence. Story 19. I'm somewhere between everyone knowing things that are actually true that we don't know yet, like yours, or things that aren't true but would radically alter the way humans treated each other. Like, you will be reincarnated as everyone who has ever lived, so the things you allow to happen to anyone are things that you will suffer yourself. If everyone felt that down in their bones to be true, we'd see some changes around here. Kinda want to know the deal with intelligent alien life, too. Story 20. In a utopian society, this would be great. In our world now, the muskrat would take money and geniuses with him and set the earth on fire as he leaves. The only happy thought would be that when money becomes irrelevant, the smart people could kick non-contributors out. I believe, though, they would bring violent people with them who are only loyal to the useless. So, less Star Trek and more Dune. Story 21. I think that just pushes the problem out one degree of removal. If the answer is yes, then immediate forever wars over which one is the true God. If no, then which atheistic philosophy or belief system is most correct to address our search for meaning and belonging, with as many disputes arising? Answer: I agree with the religion part, plus it's even more complicated than that. Even if we knew which God, then it's which books or prophets tell their real message, and after that, which verses or which translation, in an endless loop, as we could never agree on what the deity wants from us in each new era and after new developments. On the other hand, I strongly disagree with the equivalence you're trying to draw with atheistic belief systems. The mission to convert others and the need to dismiss every other god as false, as our God has to be all-powerful, is characteristic of religion. We have vast empiric evidence that most atheists are mostly indifferent to what other atheists believe. Sure, atheists can be radicalized around social or economic theses, but so can religious people, the latter on top of the risk of religious fanatism. If we had evidence that there's no God, more conflicts would disappear than they would arise, by far. Story 22. See, for me, I feel like if we solved the political corruption and oligarchy, we could educate the populace effectively and truthfully about the environment, but getting everyone to fix the environment won't fix politics, probably. Story 23. I know climate change is real. Everyone knows it is real, but then there is Taylor swiftly taking her private jet to go brush her teeth next door. So I throw away my already melting paper straw and grab the nearest plastic straw. Story 24. Newer research is showing that the current climate change issue is only about 40% human-caused, which is still bad. Ice core studies have shown that the Earth goes through a cycle, and this matches the last 4 cycles, although slightly sped up, about a 30 reduction in time frame, while also being about 50 later than the spacing between the other cycles. So it's a late cycle that is heavier than normal. One of the researchers, a woman, quipped, "Mother Earth and I have a lot in common in that regard." Story 25. The very framing of science as real or fake is silly. It's like trying to argue that trial and error isn't real. The notion presumes that science is leaned on as if it were a religion, accepting what it prescribes on the basis of faith, which literally runs counter to the very core of the scientific process. If there's one fact that people should know about science, it's not that it's real, but rather what the scientific method actually is. The flip side is that the anti-intellectual movement isn't actually fueled by a skepticism of science as a concept, but rather a distrust in the institutions that house its literature. To be fair, the way the practice of research and consensus building is conducted is much less straightforward nor regularly taught as the scientific method, and the function of academic institutions can seem much more opaque, even if it often isn't, actually. Anyways, all that said, to attack someone for claiming science is fake, or some other silly statement is to miss the point almost as much as they did. Story 26. That could be a problem depending on how this hypothetical works. If it's magical, then what happens when a new vaccine is developed? Steve in RD says he has a new vaccine, and everyone is like, cool, no testing needed because We all know vaccines are safe and work. Start manufacturing. In principle, I agree with you. Story 27. You would have to be more specific and say that a fetus is not a life worthy of rights or something like that. The whole abortion argument is that the fetus is a life. So if it's a female fetus, that body belongs to them as well in the pro-lifers' minds, meaning you could not eliminate them without consequences. Story 28. Saying the Abrahamic God could exist is like saying an invisible nightingale could be singing me to sleep every night. That's not logic. That's speculation with no evidence. The burden of proof is always on the one making the claim. If someone says something exists, they're the one who needs to demonstrate it, and not everyone else who refuses to believe it without evidence. Bringing in simulation theory or quantum mechanics doesn't help the argument. That's just swapping one unknown for another and hoping it sticks. Could be is not a foundation for truth. It's just the absence of a conclusion, and honestly, atheism shouldn't even be a category. We don't have a word for people who don't believe in invisible nightingales, unicorns, or leprechauns. We shouldn't need one for people who don't believe in gods. Saying this isn't a truth makes no sense here. If there's no evidence for something, and every testable claim about it fails, then the logical conclusion is that it doesn't exist. That's not just an opinion, it's the best working truth we have. Saying it's highly debatable, even from a scientific standpoint, is nonsense. Science doesn't keep ideas alive just because they're old or popular. If there's no evidence for something, it doesn't stay in debate forever. It gets set aside. That's how we treat everything else, be it Bigfoot, flat Earth, or ghosts. God only stays in the conversation because people are emotionally attached to the idea. What I honestly wish everyone in the world suddenly knew is what truth actually is. Not belief, not speculation, not whatever makes you feel better. Truth is what can be tested, observed, and supported by evidence. If more people understood that, maybe we wouldn't have to keep dragging conversations like this out of the mud. Education doesn't solve everything, but looking around, it's obvious we need more of it. If people want to keep hoping that something might be proven one day, fine. Get in line with the flat earthers, the Bigfoot believers, and the Loch Ness monster truthers. Anything's possible, but as of right now, nothing. No evidence, no reason to believe it unless one requires a mental teddy bear. Story 29. I mean, we could reach the depths of the ocean if we wanted. It's just nobody wants to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to see a glorified hole that is under such pressure, it's unlikely much actually lives down there. And even if something did, who cares? Definition of a waste of time and money. However, we can reasonably ascertain the composition of a planet that's further away from us than any living person has traveled in a lifetime. If there was something out there, we would have found it by now. Religion has historically and continues to do much more harm than good, so it's a very reasonable wish to squash the beliefs of everyone clinging onto archaic fairy tales that help people cope with passing, while at the same time dividing humanity and validating people in their archaic beliefs. It's holding us back as a society. Answer: if there was something out there, we would have found it by now. Wrap it up. Epistemology is over with. We've discovered everything, cancel all the grants, and close up the labs. We've reached the pinnacle of science and knowledge. I'm kidding, but in reality, and I say this as an agnostic, you're being a jerk about it. Faith for a lot of people isn't about blind dogmatic belief, it's about finding meaning and purpose. For a lot of people, it's about community and togetherness, and there is nothing wrong with that. Are there fundamentalists who literally believe that God created the Christian Bible and made the earth in 7 days and all that? Yeah, but they're the minority. That story is Jewish, and even the Jews don't think it's literal. Science and religion can coexist as long as they stay in their own lanes. Religion is about faith and finding purpose and meaning. Science is about finding facts and knowledge. To your original point, though, U-100 cannot disprove to me that Yahweh might not appear in the sky tomorrow and say, "Y'all thought I wasn't real, didn't you?" Likely? No. Impossible? No. To say it categorically cannot happen is a belief, not a fact. And we both. No beliefs don't make things true. Story 30. Beat me to it. If everyone knew that there was no God, we would cherish life that must more. Religion helps people with maintaining sexism, anti-science views, and prejudices against the LGBT community. Progress wouldn't meet so many barriers. Imagine if we didn't go to war thinking we would go to heaven. Imagine how me might live differently if we all knew we only have one life to live. Story 31. False. It's literally a positive-sum game. When trade occurs, both parties benefit ex ante. They wouldn't trade otherwise. You value my apple more than your dollar. I value your dollar more than my apple. When we trade, wealth is created for both parties through this mutual increase in utility. Story 32. It's true, not selfish. I know that therapy as a teen and antidepressants with intrusive thoughts made me way worse. I wish everyone was aware of how awful those meds are. They supposedly help some people, but definitely not me. Mental health psych hospitals also are just a money-making machine with no benefits. Healthcare overall now is only about money, and holistic practices are key, but Big Pharma made them out to be the scammers, but it was always other way around. The incentives given to doctors to prescribe specific meds, let's expose that also. COVID Vax is the perfect example of how they lie and others put people down to cave in. Everything is about the money. Sorry, so long. Story 33. So basically, you are saying everyone should know that you have no ability to think. How the native people, the first Jews were born in the land that is now Israel, can be occupiers. Are the Native Americans occupiers in America? Are the Aboriginals occupiers in Australia? You do know that Arabs are originally from Arabia. You know there was a phase of Islamic conquest. That is the reason, I'm not saying if good or bad, that Islam and Arabs got to the area. You do know that Palestine is a punishment name that originated from the Jewish Bible given to the Jews by the Romans after the Jewish rebellion was destroyed more than 400 years before Islam. Also, this is not unique treatment by the Romans to the Jews. The Romans used humiliation and other forms of psychological warfare all around their empire. And you do know that Israel from day one given the Israeli Arabs full equal rights? In contrast, the Arabs who chose to leave and not be Israeli obviously not get rights from a country they are not citizens of, just like anywhere else in the world. You, for example, don't have equal rights in other countries that you are not a citizen of. Also, the Arabs that refer themselves as Palestinians' population size increases, so to claim Israel is mindlessly eliminate them is nonsense. I do acknowledge there are Arabs that got to the land in the expansion and existence of the many empires that took a hold of it, and so lived in the area for some years, alongside the Jews that are natives and Christians that also got to the area in expansion, and that there should be a peaceful solution to those who don't want to be part of Israel. Maybe divide the area like suggested in the past, or give them an equal size area, the size that they claim now. I know that to give them the size they were talking about in the 50s is absurdly too much, including multiple countries' size in one of the bigger lands. TLDR, Israel is not an occupier, and a peaceful solution must be achieved for the benefit of all, including the Arabs. Story 34. I'm sorry, burn them. What? Like they'd stoke a fireplace to burn a book, lol, or lighter into a trash can. Or if there were so many people doing it, did they make a community bonfire a la Venice? I'm not trying to be too mukbee of a male body part, but a burning a book is so eye-rollingly cliché in this day. Was that like a euphemism for just tossing them or ripping them up? Shredding them, I'd buy. Story 35. No, the Republicans in power with their paid-for media, Glenn Beck, Fox News, etc., saw the truth and started the war on education so that they could remain in power and exploit the lower classes. They started pushing that desk jobs weren't manly or something to be proud of. They started pushing that education made you woke and socialist, basically saying that being educated was anti-American, without actually saying it out loud. After a few decades of well-placed attacks, lawsuits, and cherry-picked evidence, now here we are, millions of Americans brainwashed into being against education. Look at the attacks against education from Republicans 20 years ago versus today. It was gradual and thought out.